Well, now that we're all
Okay.
set up, we might as well just jump right in. First of all, thank you very much for being here and for talking with us today. Obviously, Fable as a whole and as a community definitely appreciates it, so thank you.
I'm very excited to do this.
Well, if you wouldn't mind starting us off by just introducing yourself, I know that you have some experience and credentials, with what you're going to be talking about today. So if you want to tell us who you are and what you're here to talk about.
Yeah, so my name is Alex. I'm a certified consent educator for sexual violence prevention. I'm also a forensic psychology student, and I focus in trauma and kink-informed consent education. I work with several volunteer organizations that are local to where I study, and I'm currently now being recruited as a consent coordinator at Faeble.
Well, once again, thank you so much for being here and for talking to us. Now, obviously, I do understand the idea of consent, the general basis of it, but I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into what really defines consent, what is consent.
So the basic, like, overarching definition of consent is agreeing to something or giving permission by choice, having the freedom and capacity to do so. You'll often hear freedom and capacity used to describe consent, and freedom is basically being free from pressure or coercion, and capacity is being conscious, sober, and safe to give and withdraw consent. There's different models of consent. There's a lot of consent educators that will say different things. There's like the consent wheel. There's a lot of really good resources and like consent acronyms and organizations that will educate about this kind of stuff. The main thing that we have are like slogans and stuff. So you will hear like yes means yes is like the latest one that I remember coming up. And I will talk about that in the context of implied and explicit consent. So they're the two like main models that I really teach because they're the ones you come across the most. So implied consent is yes until no. So essentially, you're assuming that there's consent until it is revoked. So you'll see this kind of if you have like a best friend that every time that you see them, you go and hug them. That's implied consent. You're assuming that they're okay with a hug unless one day they're like, hey, actually, I don't want a hug today. Explicit consent is the no until yes. So you're assuming that there is no consent present until it's given. So for example, you go and you meet a new person and you want to shake their hand. So you stick your hand out, asking for their consent for them to reciprocate with a handshake. They're the ones that are kind of most relevant in this context of LARP.
We have so many people that we know very closely, and also a ton of people that we're going to be meeting likely for the very first time. So it's good to know new friends, old friends. It's always good to understand where you lie and where they lie with that kind of material.
Yeah, I mean, you may have been LARPing with somebody for 7 years, and every time you go to a game, you do an assassination plot together. Like, that's an assumed thing. Now, like, you know that you guys have fun with that, you know that you do it every time. But if you're just meeting a new person that may or may not want to participate in an assassination plot at a game, you might want to talk to them first and get their actual permission if that's something they want to, like, roleplay with.
When it comes to consent within the game, I think some of the most important decisions really come from a discussion beforehand.
The other important thing with just consent in general, and what I will say is always informed consent. It's also known as like risk-aware consent. So it's making that choice to give or withdraw consent, knowing all the risks and benefits and alternatives. So if you know that you want to do a plot where you're like a big wizard and you're doing a really cool ritual, and you want to do a ritual that goes wrong, you might want to know all the implications that might have, or you may want to accept the unknown that you don't know what the actual implications will be of doing a massive ritual that goes horribly wrong. Discern for yourself what the risks and benefits and the alternative choices are when giving permission and when asking others for consent like that. So the next thing that I wanted to touch on is obviously at LARPs we have people that come from a lot of different diverse walks of life and experiences, and something that I focus on with psychology is trauma-informed consent. So the two biggest things to be aware of here is triggers and landmines. So triggers are known actions, words, or situations, behaviors, stuff like that, that will cause an adverse emotional or physical reaction, such as panic attacks. And those are things to be aware of. If you know that you have a trigger, or if your friend, for example, knows that you have a trigger, they might want to avoid those. And then landmines are kind of sneakier, which is why they're called landmines. Those are basically the unknown equivalent of a trigger. These are things that you might not know that trigger you, or that other people might not realize, and suddenly something happens and you feel those emotions come up, or those physical responses come up. And it's very important to keep those in mind and having a plan for yourself. If something happens, if there's a thing that comes up, or if you're negotiating like a little roleplay scene, or if you're negotiating like a fight, and you're starting to feel that way, maybe step away, take a break, be aware of those feelings and those emotions. And that kind of goes into self-consent as well, which is one of my favorite parts of consent. And it's treating your own needs and limits with respect. So it involves giving and withdrawing consent and permission based on your own psychological responses and physiological responses and experiences. As much as there is receiving consent from somebody and asking for consent, there's also giving it. When you feel safe, don't give consent for something you don't want to do. If you don't want to do a ritual that turns out bad, that will have adverse consequences for the realm, you can say no. Go do a little smaller ritual where you make a potion. Those are things that are up to you, and this is your experience to curate. You know, you're paying to be here, you're getting a ticket. This is your game as much as it is anybody else's.
Well, I have to say, the idea that you had mentioned, the ideas of those triggers and landmines, that does really resonate with me. And it's really, really comforting to know that Faeble not only is thinking about these situations, but has people there that are knowledgeable, that are going to be supportive and helpful.
I'm having this thought because I might be getting ahead of myself, but with specifically the play to lift encouragement and system, playing to lift doesn't mean stepping over your own comfort and giving up what you want to do at a game. It is really nice to lift other people, and you should get other people involved and try to do as much as you can to help others create a good world for themselves as well. But that shouldn't supersede your own comfort. While you should be considerate of others, obviously, we always try to encourage playing with other people and uplifting their storylines, but you never have to do that at your own expense if that's not something that you are comfortable with.
Fable itself also has built-in structures within the game to help convey and help touch on consent within play.
Faeble, which is really cool to see, Faeble has both de-escalation and escalation calls within the game. Others from a different game may be familiar with the Oh Mother call. It's basically said in the context of, hey, take it down a notch. This is going a little bit far. De-escalate the situation a bit. If you're coming to the gates of the town guard and you're reporting somebody for wearing 2 right socks on a Sunday, and you start yelling at the town guard, oh, they should be arrested, they need a ticket, this is all going too far, they have too many socks on their feet. And suddenly the town guard is like, oh mother, that you are very passionate about that. It's because there's so much emotion, and sometimes people may not like that. It's a way to kind of bring it back a little bit. It's a way to check in with the other person and say like, hey, take it down a notch. And it's really, really nice to have. There's also like the nonverbal systems where you can just kind of buy out of a scene. You can do, I think is believe the fingers on the forehead for out of game, like conversation if that needs to happen. But all of those things are tools for players to use. They're tools for you to have a safer and more fun experience that is more enjoyable, that you can curate. And it's a way for players to talk to each other without necessarily having to buy out and have a conversation, but they can kind of just use their judgment and de-escalate as needed. And on the other side of that is the hear me now call, which is the escalation, which is bring more drama. Like, you're not yelling enough about these socks. Hear me now. This is a horrible offense. And that kind of encourages to bring it back up, take up the energy.
I'm a big, like, combat safety guy. So I usually think about these oh mother calls within the context of combat, saying, you know, oh mother, that strike was like iron, running back the idea of, hey, maybe pull your shots a bit. But it is really, really important that people also remember exactly what you said, which is these calls can be made in verbal, quote-unquote, altercations, situations, plot lines. Anything that doesn't necessarily just have to do with combat. It can be, as you said, a situation where someone is very, very passionate and someone has to say, oh mother, perhaps I should go check on something else for a moment.
They're very, very helpful and they're very nice. I think people need to also remember that when you hear, for example, an oh mother call, I know that there are a lot of people who struggle with anxiety and just general like experiences in life, that maybe when they hear an oh mother, they think, oh my god, I've done something wrong. This is not necessarily, oh mothers are not always for like super horrible things that happen, like, oh my god, I'm gonna go cry. It could just be like, hey, just pull the volume down a little bit. Or like, pull your shot back a little bit, you're hitting too hard. Don't beat yourself up if somebody oh mothers you. As long as you are taking that and following the rule set and actually pulling back or having a conversation with them, that's all that really matters. I think we, as LARPers, we tend to give like a decent amount of grace on stuff. I think, you know, landmines happen. It's nobody's fault. Sometimes people do things on accident. It's nobody's fault. Just adjust. You have those calls in there for a reason.
The one thing that I always think about is the difference between, oh mother, your strikes are like iron, and oh mother, I am done for in this fight, or oh mother, I am through with this fight. Because one is basically saying, "Hey, you are striking a little too hard. I'd like you to reel that back." And the other is, "I think I'm done fighting with you." And it's important to recognize both. One of the things that we mention a lot when it comes to "Oh Mothers," it may be pressing in your mind to follow that person and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. What is that?" As you mentioned, it's not on purpose. It's an accident. And as you said, landmines happen. Giving them time to approach you when they feel they are ready can absolutely help the situation from what I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, we have the urge always to kind of make things right and to apologize and to explain ourselves. And that always comes from the best intentions. But just giving somebody space, I think, is also important because you never know how, like, intense or emotional the experience was for them, and just giving them time to have to themselves for a bit is always good.
There will be children at Fable. It is a family-friendly game. We will have families there, and we will have children. I know that was something that you also were going to speak about.
I've been LARPing for 8 years, and I started at like a kids LARP because I was a minor at the time. And I volunteer with educating kids in like engineering and stuff. So this is something that I'm very passionate about, is like kids safety at events, because Fable is for everyone. It's kind of an all ages event. It's important to factor in the safety for those people as well, because they are their own players, and there are more rules on in the play guide about kids at Fable and what the interactions are in that regard. But I think the most important part is the wristbands. Wristbands for anybody 21 and up will be blue, and then wristbands for 18 to 20 will be green, and they will have, I believe, a U21 written on them. And then anybody under 18 will have yellow wristbands with a U18 written on them. Kids will have like their own quests, and they'll have their own like monsters and creatures they can interact with. Again, part of like informed consent and self-consent is how comfortable are you interacting with kids at a LARP. Not every space is for kids. Some spaces are kid-friendly. And it's important to remember that, stay in the spaces that you want to interact with. Obviously, be appropriate and safe around kids. Let them have their own time. They are there as much as anybody else. They have the right to do their own, like, RP. Make sure to remember that, they are still individual people, but they are not adults.
It's really refreshing to see how much stock Fable has put into not just the physical safety, but the emotional and mental safety of its players. All three are incredibly important. Unfortunately, we do have to come to one of the more negative aspects, and that is, what happens when there is a consent incident. Who do we go to talk to? What is the protocol, to the best of what we can say?
Yeah, so obviously there's like an internal chain of escalation stuff, but the main thing is, no matter what like scale or intent, like sometimes boundaries are crossed and consent incidents happen. It's the unfortunate reality, whether it's intentional or not. If there are concerns, or if there's something that players need to report, there are in-game refs all around on the grounds. So those are like the town guard, those are, I believe, the guild leads, those are the culture leads. Those are all people that you can talk to, and they will have the tools necessary to escalate it or assist you in whatever way they can. Again, there's never any judgment, there's never any shame. If there is something that players need to report, they're always encouraged to do so.
I'm not sure if you have anything you'd like to add, anything regarding the game. We'd be happy to hear it.
The main thing really is I'm very excited for the opportunity. Consent is something that I'm obviously very passionate about, that I've been doing for quite a while. I enjoy seeing a game willing to work with somebody to actually forward all of these like ideas and all these concepts, because it's not something that I hear a lot. Obviously there's like in-game calls at some games, and there's like the bow-out systems, but I think those are usually more find out at the event things. So like the wristband colors, I've had trouble with wristband colors at games where they don't tell you which ones are for which demographic, or you just don't see consent being addressed as heavily. And I really enjoyed seeing the section about kids at Faeble, because it's something that I was looking to see how those interactions would come up, and it's great to see that they've considered, like, oh, some people might not want to interact with kids, so they have their own stuff they can do. Just really refreshing to see so much thought and, as you said, like, care being put into something like this.
This team has really been shaping up to be an incredible team, and I'm really happy to have you on it. So thank you so much for coming and talking to us about this obviously very important topic, and thank you so much for being a part of the Fable team.
Thank you for interviewing. I really appreciate it.